You're welcome to the only show that brings you happiness in the world of diplomacy and international relations, diplomatic affairs. My name is Harriet Nartey. The show comes off on Pan-African television every Saturday from 4:20 to 5:20 p.m. And you can also catch up with us on our Facebook and YouTube channels. We are global, so wherever you find yourself, you can always join us and get to know the issues trending when it comes to the diplomatic and international space. And this is what we will be doing today. As always, we have sampled all the stories and we have identified the ones that actually resonate with what we stand for. We will be talking about a lot. We'll be starting from home. We'll be taking you to Africa, and of course we'll be taking you to the rest of the world as well. My guests are ready and seated. I'll take a break. When I come back, I will introduce them and we will start the conversation right away. Right, so welcome back once again. As I mentioned, my guests are seated and the topics are very interesting. I believe their insights are going to be very helpful as we break down the issues, all the complexities around all these issues. Sometimes some of the issues, confuse all of us. We need the right people to sit and help us understand what is happening, the nitty-gritties of the various issues. And today, joining me, last week they were on the show, or 2 weeks ago, because we had a replay of the show last week, Saturday. This week, by popular request, I have been asked to bring them again on this edition so that they can help me, analyze the issues and break them down. So with me is, let me start with Ruben Ado. Ruben Ado is a senior journalist, editor at Pan-African Television, and of course, producer of Diplomatic Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us, Ruben.
The pleasure is
How are you?
Fantastic.
Ready?
Absolutely.
Right. And also I have Ibrahim Ejay. Ibrahim Ejay is a political analyst, and of course he was also with us 2 weeks ago when that was his first time joining us on the show, and he's become a regular, so you'll be seeing more of him on our platforms. Ibrahim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Harriet. A very good morning.
Well, it's evening. Let me say, right?
Yes.
It's evening.
Yeah,
it's been a long
yes.
day. It's been a long day. You're right. So yes, welcome. Class is already in session. We'll be talking about a lot of interesting topics we have tabled for you. Let me start. We'll be starting from home. So we'll be talking about the Honorable Minister for Foreign Affairs, Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwe's rebuttal with the U.S. Senator Jim Risch. We'll be talking about that on this episode of the show. It seems to have made a lot of noise, and I also went on Facebook to post because people were asking about my opinion, my view on this political issue. Let me put it that way. Diplomatically, I had to share my view on the issue, so I made a post on social media, Facebook to be precise. We'll also be talking about visa reciprocity. Ghanaians face new visa requirements after U.S. visa policy review. Yes, we'll be talking more about this. You need to be interested. So the usual 5 years that you've been getting has been slashed down to 3 months. First entry visas. We'll be talking about that. And also we'll talk about unrest in Togo. Citizens demand accountability and democratic reform. The role of the regional blocs. We'll talk about ECOWAS, and then we'll talk about the continental bloc as well. So we'll look at this. And Kenya is also on heat every now and then. Tensions rise in Kenya amid widespread of protest and civil unrest. And Trump hosts 5 West African leaders to discuss trade and development. Interesting. And 2025 BRICS Summit, Tinubu urges greater African representation at the global stage. We'll talk about that. And of course, we have EU in the spotlight, where we spotlight the various activities undertaken by the European Union here in Ghana. Now, gentlemen, as you have rightly heard, are we ready?
We're ready.
All right. So let's begin from home. Let's take our first story, and let's talk about the Honorable Minister for Foreign Affairs, Samuel Okudzeto, in a heated exchange with the U.S. Senator. And a key member of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, James Risch, has criticized Ghana's Foreign Minister and Minister Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa for the latter's deeply satisfying and mutually beneficial ties with China. He is of the view that Ghana ought to prioritize repaying U.S. companies and taxpayers instead of focusing on settling huge debts to China. Instead of a trip, and I quote, instead of a trip to D.C., Ghana's Foreign Affairs Minister should focus on honoring his government's commitments. Unquote. The senator warned that the U.S. won't keep subsidizing Ghana when China debt is a bigger priority. Now, in a sharp rebuttal on Facebook, Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa stated that Risch will not be allowed to dictate to a sovereign state like Ghana on how it conducts its foreign policy. He added that those measly debts, and I'm quoting, those measly debts compared to what you owe us in reparations would be paid when we deem appropriate based on our prudent economic recovery program, even though the debt was not created by the new Mahama administration. Unquote. Or still, on him, he says, unlike you, we take responsibility and honor our national obligations. Gentlemen, you know, I had to comment on Facebook because I had received a lot of messages from people who associate me with this platform, and they were asking for my view on whether that was a diplomatic or undiplomatic move. First and foremost, we'll talk about a sovereign state running its own affairs, given the fact that it decides on how it runs its foreign policy, and another actually stating or dictating to the country how to run their foreign policy. But this is so because they feel like we owe them and that they have the right to actually remind us to, commit to our obligation. Let's talk about this diplomatically. Is this even right in the diplomatic space? Ibrahim.
In terms of, again, thank you very much, Harriet, and good evening once again. In terms of the banter between the two, diplomatically it's not right. Diplomacy requires that no matter the severity of an issue, back channels are used to actually solve issues. And it's not something that you wash your quote-unquote dirty linen in public. But if you were to ask me who is at fault, principally, it's Senator Jim Risch from Idaho. Because that kind of stance, that kind of berating and forcibly dictating to a sovereign nation such as Ghana is uncalled for. And so we shouldn't somehow dilute the fact that he has erred in a momentous way. I'll come to Honorable Okudzeto-Ablakwa's response in a minute, but you've got to see how provocative, what triggered the response. It's a cause and effect. And if we were to somehow skew our critique of Honorable Okudzeto-Ablakwa, we somehow leave Senator Risch out of the picture, and we shouldn't do that. And I say that because he is the ranking member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. A Republican, that means he's the leader. And so he's helping to shape foreign policy.
Of his country.
Of his country. And so even though he's not a minister per se, he's not Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, which is the equivalent to Honorable Okudzeto-Ablakwa. He has a strong influence. And it's shaped by his own ideology. He is vehemently against China. He calls China the most important foreign affairs challenge to the United States and a malign influence. And so if you look at his voting record, anything that he can do per his voting record which will limit China's economic, military or geopolitical influence, you'll see Jim Risch there. So it's no surprise that given our focus on paying China's debts, he wants to come back and somehow dictate or lecture to Ghana. In January 2025, he supported President Trump's freeze on foreign aid. Now, I'm in favor of that. Let me set my stall on that. Africa needs to really cut its the coattails of dependency. But I'm just giving you a reference point so we know the mindset of Jim Risch in that. He supported the freeze, made sure that, again, USAID, which is now defunct, United States aid on international development, is now effectively defunct because they've accused it of having funding from George Soros and co. But all that narrative that I'm giving, Harriet, feeds into how he wanted to somehow dominate the discussion by triggering such a provocative, undiplomatic communique. You don't do that. It's never done. And now if I come to Honorable Okujoto Black, he was right to vociferously push back. Some may disagree, but he could have done it better, because again, sometimes you have to take the higher road. You have to set the bar higher. You are the foreign minister, and if you're provoked in such a way, there are ways in which you can communicate our dissatisfaction with the way and manner and the wording that Jim Risch used. But then he wandered off into a tangent about reparations, and that diluted the efficacy, the strength of his rebuttal, because reparations, for me, they don't sit in the same space. Somehow you're blaming America that they should pay Ghana and Africa, but if you scratch the surface, there are instances of Africans selling Africans during the slave trade. So I mean, maybe we can get into that. For me, that diluted that thing about these measly debts. Again, that's undiplomatic language. Because what are you telling America? Remember, you are representing Ghana when you speak as our foreign minister. And all it takes is one individual. Just as Jim Risch, a careless, unwarranted, rude, undiplomatic post on X has necessarily triggered a response from our foreign minister. But he had to do it in a more measured way, in a way that would maintain his status. You have to have gravitas as a diplomat, as a minister. Maintain your gravitas and let other onlookers see the worthless, and I'm using that word deliberately, accusations and threats against our sovereignty that Jim Risch used against us. He should have taken that a higher level of response.
Well, Ruben, do you agree that Jim Risch's approach to this particular issue deserved the way and manner the Foreign Affairs Minister also, decided to kind of, yes, answer him?
First and foremost, let me state that Ghana is a sovereign and independent nation. I mean, after attaining independence on 6 March 1957, Ghana became the 81st member of the United Nations. And Ghana set the tone for emancipation from the shackles of colonialism and imperialism. So that is very paramount. Now, I don't know what triggered Honorable James Risch to make that statement, but per what I have read or known about him, it comes as no surprise, because as a Republican, a hardliner, he wouldn't want to see countries aligning themselves with China, which obviously is a threat to the supremacy of the United States. Now, he goes out there to make a statement which I honestly think was not carefully thought. And in diplomatic circles, when some of these statements are made and you want to respond fittingly, you should know how to go about it. Because if care is not taken, you might drift off from how this issue needs to be dealt with.
Would you say he could have done better, given the fact that he is a senior diplomat? He could have done better.
Yes, he could have done better, but maybe it could be that this statement had political undertones. You know, he belongs to the Republicans. And we know the track record of the Republicans, unlike the Democrats. This is somebody who has vocally supported President Trump's freeze on foreign aid, U.S. aid.
Most of his policies.
So most of his policies, it clearly tells you the line he's towing. And unfortunately, I don't know why he targeted Ghana, but maybe he's doing it deliberately. Maybe from Ghana, he would extend it to other countries. But when he made the statement, I was thinking that it could be a trap, because we know what these superpowers are capable of. Sometimes they can sit from the comfort of their zones and do what pleases them to elicit a response, just to see how able you are with regards to handling certain things. And I think that Okudzeto was right to respond, but the tone of the language and the issue of reparations, for me, I thought it was a no. Maybe he could have addressed it in a more fitting and appropriate manner, so that we wouldn't have an issue where we would want to paint ourselves bad, or, excuse my language, we would want to wash our dirty linen in public. Because sometimes when you are dealing with issues like this, you need to be tactful of the language you use. And I think that, honestly speaking, our Foreign Affairs Minister could have done better.
Our Foreign Affairs Minister could have done better. Will this have any implication on U.S.-Ghana bilateral relations? Before I move to the next topic, which is somehow tied in all of this, because I've heard people say that this might be as a result of, you know, what happened earlier. But we'll come to that. But then, would this have any implications?
It may do, but I doubt that it will. Had it been coming from the president, I'm talking His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, it would set a different tone. That's not to say that your ministers cannot also undermine the bilateral relationship. It can. And sometimes all it takes is one individual with one unguarded statement to unravel years of bilateral relationship building. But I don't think in the current economic and political climate that this response from our Foreign Minister, Honorable Okudzeto Blackwell, would trigger a deterioration within our relationship with America. That's not to say, we know that Trump is famed for being unpredictable. It's important that we set that stall out. But there are far too many, I think, American interests within Ghana for Trump to, or the State Department to somehow cut ties. I mean, that's the worst case scenario. But again, they could make sure that their power is felt. Again, I know we'll touch on it later, maybe visa restrictions and some soft power, some areas to show that, you know, we are in charge and we are not amused by the way in which you have responded to Jim Rich. But having said that, I still maintain, in order for Africa to stand up, never kneel down. I mean, there's that saying, I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. And so in that environment, I'm 100% in support of the veracity and the determined language that our Foreign Minister used to rebut it, because it was provocative. But just that reparations thing just undermined, you know, the razor sharp or laser focused response that it should have given.
All right. Now let's move on. Now somehow this, well, you will be in the best position to tell me if this, you know, has anything to do with, you know, a previous encounter between the Foreign Affairs Minister and, of course, the U.S. Senate. So we have U.S. revises B1, B2 visa policy for Ghanaians. Now 3 months validity, single entry. It used to be 5 years and above. Is that right? Now we have 3 months validity, single entry. The United States government has revised its visa reciprocity policy for Ghana, limiting the duration and number of entries permitted under most non-immigrants visa classifications. Now, according to the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Consular Affairs, holders of A-class visas, primarily diplomats and government officials, will continue to receive multiple entry visas with validity ranging from 24 to 60 months. Similarly, the K-1 visa issued to the foreign citizen fiancé of a U.S. citizen intending to marry within 90 days of arrival in the United States, and the K-2 visa granted to the unmarried dependent child under 21 years old of a K-1 visa holder are both single entry visas valid for a 6-month period. The K-3 visa for the foreign citizen spouse of a U.S. citizen and the K-4 visa for their unmarried dependent child under 21 years old are both multiple entry visas valid for 24 months. All other visa applicants, including those applying for B-class visas, which cover business and tourism travel, will now be issued single entry visas valid for just 3 months. And this was issued, I don't know whether it has come into effect yet. I want to believe it's undergoing, the process. But this came out on the 9th of July. How interesting. Could this be mere coincidence? After the banter between our Honorable Minister for Foreign Affairs and, of course, the U.S. Senate, Jim Risch. Ruben.
In a neo-colonial sense, I will borrow the words of late Captain Thomas Sankara, who is on record to have said that he who feeds you controls you. Mm-hmm. So, in a neo-colonial sense, America is still calling the shots. So put Jim Risch and Okujeto Ablakwa aside. I think that we still enjoy good relations with the United States, regardless or irrespective of, the banter we spoke on. And I think in the course of the week, we had some parts of Texas being devastated.
All right.
And Ghana extended her sympathies to the United States of America. And with the announcement of this, I think it's refreshing for some. But for others who look at it from both sides of the coin. In as much as we don't want a deterioration of our relations with the United States, we should be careful as to how we deal with our major development partners. Because it's our interest we should seek, and it should be Ghana first. If it's Ghana's interest we are seeking, we should seek it to the best of our ability and make sure that we accrue what will inure to the benefit of the Guinean citizenry, so that in the end, Ghana will ultimately be the biggest beneficiary, and not the United States.
Right. Ibrahim.
The key word is reciprocity. We've got to ask ourselves, what are the visa terms and conditions that we offer U.S. citizens? And that's where you'll find your answer. We are not giving 5 years multi-entry visas. We are not. Check with immigration. So that's a key word, reciprocity. Do me, I do you. And so I don't have an issue with it. But of course, per se, the issue that I have is that Ghanaians now have to reapply, which of course means more money for the US. Embassies and missions that it has. We're speaking about Ghana so specifically here. But of course, Nigeria is also affected. We have to understand something. This is what I would want to get across. The more we continue as a people, Harriet, to see that as the promised land, we will forever be subjugated. We will forever, you grow up, you're a kid in school or your college, university, and your goal is I've got to get to Abrochi. For those who are listening on the international platforms, Abrochi is overseas.
Oh, I've got to Japa.
I've got to Japa, yeah. See, going abroad. I mean, it's an ambition we all have worldwide. American citizens too. Growing up, they want to do a gap year, travel abroad, work abroad, live abroad. It's an innate human ambition to see the world. But having said that, we here somehow capture it as a lifelong ambition. And it shouldn't be. we should have a lifelong ambition to see what we can do to add value to Ghana and therein Africa. The moment we turn our attention to how can we build what we have here, as opposed to add value elsewhere, and that becomes our ambition, and you're going to visa fraudsters and all manner of people to get your foot on over into Ellis Island, that's where we are defeated. That's just my preface, Harriet. I'm not saying nobody should, aim to travel abroad. That's not what I'm saying. But the focus, the determination, we would invest all of our time, effort, and money if we just did 50% of that into our own entrepreneurial efforts, homegrown within Ghana and on the continent. There's so much that we can achieve. But as I say, it's reciprocity. It's saying that how we are treated is how we are now going to treat. Unless the Ghana Immigration Service wants to tell me that carte blanche as a measure or as a policy, we offer 5 years visa with multiple entry. We don't do that. We ask even the business visa holders to renew every year or every 2 years, depending on what you're given. Even if you're an expatriate residing in Ghana, I think it's every year, every 2 years you have to renew. It's not constant. It's not a constant. And I think generally I stand to be corrected. The 3-month visa to renew is what we do, and we do that for national security reasons. We want to know that you are here on legitimate business. I'm talking those who visit Ghana, and then we want the mechanism to see you on regular intervals, check your visa status, and renew it if there is nothing untoward happening. So Ghanaians should not, because we've been having it so good, the moment somebody removes the rug, we think we're being hard done by.
Yeah.
And it's reciprocity. The key word is there. I'm being reciprocal. And it's not, Ghana's not being somehow singled out.
Right.
You've got to look at the measures, the visas that are being given across the continent and see how they reflect what the host nation is also doing in regards to American tourists and business personnel entering that country as well.
You've been talking about reciprocity. You've been talking about he who feeds you calls the shot. Is that right? Now, let me ask you, when we talk about reciprocity in this context, do you think a country like America and other countries, so I don't want to use the word smaller countries, but a country like America, developing countries, do we stand, or do they stand, are they enough to say that, what, this is going to be purely business, transactional? We are not going to kowtow to anything. We are not going to, we can't, are we in that position to actually call the shots also, as it should be?
With our over-reliance on the West, in this time and age, we would always be kowtowing to their dictates, which shouldn't be the case. I see no reason why we should have that lifelong ambition of having to travel overseas before we make it in life. I mean, Africa is endowed with everything, from minerals to what have you. So why are we not tapping our own resources to benefit the good people of this continent? Look at the mineral wealth of DR Congo. I mean, the wealth that country has is proportional to settling Africa's total external debt, because they have virtually everything.
Can developing nations stand up to the West?
Well, we can't stand up to the West with one voice. That is, if we decide to come together, we put aside our differences, regardless of whether we belong to the Anglophone or Francophone bloc, and come together with one voice, we can stand up to the West. Our forebears did it in 1961. They said non-aligned. We faced neither East nor West, because of the global tension which arose at that time. So why has it become extremely difficult for us in this time and age still being subjugated to some of these things when we should lean ourselves from it?
As you have stated, we are enough. We have the human resource, we have the minerals as well. So there's so much that we can do. I don't know about standing up to the West, if that's a good thing, but there can be some kind of partnership, agreements, right, that we can still be able to stand on our own and do all the things that we want to do. So it doesn't have to be necessarily standing up to anybody, but by way of partnership. Is that right?
Yes, so you're right, Harriet. And when I say standing up, I don't mean in an adversarial way.
Absolutely.
That's why I changed it to be competing.
Okay.
And sometimes the nomenclature, the words that you use can define you and how you chart your future going forward. And it's important for Africa to really look within itself, and then within itself look to see how you can create those partnerships. I'm sure we're going to talk about BRICS in a minute, am I right?
We'll be talking about BRICS, yes.
And that's another area in which we can find strong collaboration, whereby the global south can actually have a global voice. But it all comes down to, you need that economic strength, you know, and Kwame Nkrumah said it. He said, seek ye first what, the political kingdom? But the days of those, that is relevant at the time. Now you've got to seek the economic kingdom.
Different context.
Yeah, different context. And so we have to really pull resources. And by resources, and again, I'm not saying about the in-ground mineral resources. The resources that are in here, in your cerebral cortex, your cerebellum, your medulla oblongata, we need to really use our grey matter in a very intuitive, a very inspirational, a very go-getting kind of spirit way. And we do it every day. Just that we're not linking up and joining resources. We have smart young men and women, Gen Z, who are now in that digital space. You know, M-Pesa is indigenous to Africa. I'm talking the mobile money payment from Kenya. You know, so we have brilliant young minds who can, given the opportunity, really work together and build an Africa that can stand on its own, but look for partnership with a global community as well.
Creating an enabling environment for the youth is very necessary. All right, now let's move on. We are going to be talking about Kenya and Togo, the unrest in both countries. So I'll treat this as a two-in-one story, because we are looking at, in a bigger picture, we are looking at the African Union, the role of the African Union. But let me do the leads separately, and then we can merge this and talk about this. Now, tensions rise in Kenya amid widespread of protests and civil unrest. Protests were organized in Kenya by the youth to mark 1 year since they stormed parliament at the peak of anti-government demonstrations. The protests saw thousands of the youth take to the streets in the country to commemorate last year's youth-led demonstrations against tax rises. At least 12 people lost their lives and hundreds more left following the nationwide anti-government protest. Rights groups also alleged that at least 60 people were killed by security forces in last year's disturbances. Now, let me just do Togo as well. Just a moment. But when we talk about this, I want us to discuss this with the African Union in mind. When we look at all these protests happening left, right, center on the African continent, I know that ECOWAS has issued a release, a circular kind of, and I asked myself, is it enough? It's one thing to release a circular to talk about the situation, and it's another thing to actually act. What is happening? Ibrahim.
Now we start with Togo first, or Kenya?
We start with this is Kenya, so we'll do Kenya.
Yeah.
What's happening?
Well, it's two key areas for Kenya. One is the economic hardships that the people are facing. That's what triggered, if you recall, the riots and the mass protests, and they forced the government of William Ruto to actually do a U-turn and to roll back some of its initiatives in terms of tax. And then we have the police brutality linked to people protesting about the hardships. It goes back to they call it the Saba Saba, you know, in 1990, when they were protesting against one-party rule, the days of Arap Moi. So that generation has grown to be more vocal. And what's happening, to answer your question, Harriet, is that the police brutality is just wanton. It is not right, and it should be condemned in the strictest of sense. These are your fellow Kenyans, or our fellow Africans. that you're abusing, brutalizing, and killing. I mean, how do you take live rounds to somehow discipline a protest? I can't understand it. And we should, as a continent, never mind just ECOWAS, SADC should be saying something more. The Maghreb community should be saying something more. Because unless we check our peers, these things will be allowed to go on.
Including the East African community.
Yes. It shouldn't happen. Because they're not looking to overthrow the government. It's not a coup d'etat whereby you feel that there's an existential threat to your legitimacy. They're saying that taxes are too high. There's the burden right now. I mean, the debt is around $80 billion, 70% of their GDP. I'm talking Kenya specifically. And they're asking for better governance and better accountability of the state resources. The millions or billions of shillings that are being used for certain projects. Recently we heard that there's going to be a church that is going to be built, am I right, within the state? Am I right? At the presidency? I'm all for religion, but you have to make sure that carry the people. And this is where leaders, not just in Africa, worldwide, when you don't carry the populace, you'll find that you are at the wrong end of the stick. When it comes to a luta continua, that mantra will come up. Carry the people, have a consensus, create a conversation whereby you say, for XYZ, we need to introduce this policy, introduce this tax, and we want your input. And I don't mean just the stakeholders. Have town hall meetings. Let democracy, which means government of the people, by the people, for the people, in terms of the Latin etymology of the word, let it mean something. So how do you make government democracy be of, by, and for the people? Engage the people at that town hall level. And so people can see that my voice, if it's not been accepted, has been heard. And this is where Kenya is finding, and the government is finding difficulty. And likewise, ECOWAS has been a toothless bulldog, given what's happening in Togo. I don't know if Ruben wants to take on that.
And I'm coming to that. There have been protests in Togo. It's been some weeks now. And protests in Togo emerged weeks after for Nyasegbe, who was the president for 2 decades, 20 good years, and whose family has ruled the country for 58 good years, was sworn as president of the Council of Ministers with no official term limit recently. Now, demonstrations have been banned in the country since 2022, with authorities citing security reasons. Reports say 7 people have been dead, and of course, it goes on and on. And at this point, that's where I ask, what is the role of, let's say, ECOWAS and the African Union? What are we doing in this sense?
So this is where the African Union and ECOWAS would need to act swiftly and decisively. Because we've gotten to a point where leaders on the continent will need to respect term limits, regardless of who voted them into office. I mean, we've had instances of coups. I have always said, and I've always maintained, that coups are a useless exercise. I am not someone who will favor an ambitious soldier who would want to change, government through the barrel of a gun. But, like I would quietly put it, why are we having such a situation in Togo? If you would realize, this is a country which has been under the Nasimbe Eyadema
dynasty. It's a dynasty.
58 years.
It's a dynasty.
We saw it in Gabon when Omar Bongo exited, his son took over. We saw it in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Laurent Desire Kabila. Then we saw Joseph Kabila Kabange. Even the late Gaddafi, it was rumored that he was grooming Saif al-Islam Gaddafi to take over once he had exited. As I speak, Yoweri Museveni, who has been in power since 1986 in Uganda, is seeking to extend his rule. And the African Union is quiet about it.
Why is the African Union quiet?
Because
then you are talking about protests within the region or on the continent, right? These are some of the things that actually lead to protest. When people are not happy, when AU is quiet, AU doesn't act in the interest of the people. AU is quiet. AU is always quiet until something happens. Then they start issuing circulars and press releases. But like I said from the beginning, it's one thing to issue or release anything, you know, showing your displeasure about the situation. It's another thing to actually take action. Can there be some kind of sanctions, you know, regarding heads of states when it comes to these things? At least that would deter leaders from abusing power.
There can be sanctions, but would the sanctions be deterrent enough? I mean, what haven't we seen in Uganda? You have Yoweri Museveni, who would always use the police and the army to repel protests staged in favor of the opposition leader Bobi Wine. I mean, we've had instances where the opposition are always dealt with brutally by the armed forces acting in collaboration with the police. And I'm not surprised, because given what we've seen in Togo, if care is not taken, the unthinkable might occur. And that is
it's brewing already.
Yes, it's brewing, and that is where ECOWAS will delegate a team of, I always would want to term them a council of elders to go and mediate and find an achievable solution to this impasse. We wouldn't want to get there, because with the Kenya situation, the Gen Zs are fed up. They've cited high cost of living, there is widespread unemployment, and now President William Ruto, who was forced to withdraw the unpopular finance bill, I mean, has gone the extra mile in suppressing protests brutally. They are not calling for a change of government. They are exercising their inalienable democratic rights. Why would you have to use the police against them? We see this happening in Nairobi. If care is not taken, it might extend to Eldoret and Mombasa. Don't forget, a blogger was brutally murdered, Alberto Juan. Who would be the next victim? African leaders, we have reposed our confidence in you. All we expect is to improve our living conditions, like the late Professor Mill said. The only justification for being in politics is to improve the living conditions of the masses. If you fail to live up to expectation, that is where democratically we will kick you out through the ballot box and not through the bullet. Our African leaders, please.
Well, as we speak, the 47th ordinary session of the African Union is happening in Equatorial Guinea. And I ask, is this what is going to be the outcome of this meeting, especially in these times where we have these things happening on the African continent? You know, AU has to really be up and do something about this issue. When I talk about the African Union, I get tired, to be honest with you. I don't like treating the subjects just as news items. That's why we have resource persons here to provide, you know, insights to these stories. We'll be following, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this again to see what happens, you know, in the coming days. Now, let's do this story. That's another interesting story. U.S. President Trump hosts 5 West African leaders to discuss trade and development. Now, United States President Donald Trump has met leaders from 5 African countries as he escalates a trade war that could impact developing countries' reliance on commerce with the U.S. Now, the countries are Mauritania, Liberia, Gabon, Guinea-Bissau, and Senegal. The focus of this meeting was to discuss trade and business opportunities. Trump said the 5 countries were unlikely to face U.S. tariffs. During the lunch, Trump said the leaders, and I quote, the leaders hail from very vibrant places. Very vibrant places, gentlemen, with very valuable lands, great minerals, great oil deposits, and wonderful people. And quote, at the meeting, Trump claimed, again, I quote, there's a lot of anger on the African continent, which majority has been solved by the United States, unquote. Now, these 5 countries whose leaders met Trump represent a small fraction of U.S.-Africa trade. But they possess untapped natural resources. Senegal and Mauritania are important transit and origin countries when it comes to migration, and along with Guinea-Bissau are struggling to contain drug trafficking, both issues of concern for the Trump administration. However, African Union officials question how Africa could deepen trade ties with the U.S. under what they called abusive tariff proposals and visa restrictions, largely targeting travelers from Africa. Now, the top U.S. diplomat for Africa, Ambassador Troy Fitrell, has dismissed allegations of unfair U.S. trade practices. Gentlemen, how strategic is this meeting? 5 African countries. How strategic is this when it comes to U.S. interest and foreign policy? The cards have already been laid publicly, right? He stated why his interest in picking those countries that he chose to have a meeting with, right? So it's very clear they have something that America wants. You can't fault anybody for identifying a person with something that could be valuable to their lives or to them, can you? It's all about strategic thinking. We are not faulting America for this move, but is Africa speaking with one voice in the midst of everything that is happening? Because we saw what happened when Trump slapped tariffs on some European countries. The entire European Union came together with one voice and spoke. It was after that that other countries bilaterally decided to go to Trump, have a meeting to discuss their interests. Are we seeing this in the one voice force? How strategic is this? Ruben?
United we stand, divided we fall. So you're revisiting Nkrumah's quotes. So once again, Trump, who is not the best of diplomats, I must admit, has strategically done it once again. He's called out a few and says, so let's have a meeting. I mean, forget about what the others are saying. You know, I still love Africa.
I'm allowed to issue a disclaimer, right? That's your personal opinion. Thank you
Forget
so
about
much.
what the others are saying. Let's have a meeting and see how best we can address the problems. Because America has a vested interest. He cited Guinea-Bissau. And Guinea-Bissau has gained notoriety for the drug trafficking. It's become a transit point. The U.S. knows that through the Drug Enforcement Agency, they can collaborate with your local authorities to go after the drug cartels. Nice one. Now, he's saying that, okay, the others, we know that with the exception of U.S., who have had a mutually beneficial and deeply satisfying relationship back in the day, come and, I mean, that's the U.S. you are dealing with, right? Forget about what the others are saying, and Africa sits and looks on in awe. Wow, but we should have had one voice so that we pour out our frustration at the Trump administration for those abusive tariffs it came out with. Now, strategically, he's decided to use unfair and unorthodox means to still subjugate us. And what are we supposed to say? The 5 who attended the meeting with him, are we going to sit and take them out of crucial decision making at the AU level? Or perhaps we would be so lenient like we always do and say, oh well they did it not in the interest of the entire continent, but they did it solely for their respective countries. But when it comes to maybe decisions taken at that level, we might maybe excuse them. And there you go again. Trump is always in the news for obvious reasons.
Ibrahim, we are wrapping up on this topic. Yeah. Are we going to stand together? I mean, this is very strategic in, every sense of the word. How I see this to be a serious distraction, and I see this as well calculated. So these guys would go meet Trump and come back. Once it fits their interest, every other thing at the collective level, continentally at the African Union, it's all about the each one for himself, God for us. What's happening here?
Let me frame my submission in a way that is constructive. It's very important, Harriet, that at the Africa Union level, we have a certain edict, a law, a framework whereby any body, as in a foreign country, looking to discuss any trade related to our minerals has to be done within the continental framework. I mean, we just need to take that decision. that your minerals are yours. We're not saying it belongs to Ghana or Ghana's belongs to Namibia. But let's have that unified common purpose. You know, because some reports say that they were summoned. Look at the language. They were summoned as opposed to invited. It goes back to what you're saying is, can we stand up to them? If the bloc says we're open for business, please come to Addis Ababa and have that meeting. If you can't come, you send your delegation to, I'm talking Donald Trump, to Addis Ababa, and we have an economic office that deals principally on this. If you wanted to do your own invitation where minerals are not on the agenda, by all means, let the 54 sovereign nations do that trip and see you. But there needs to be that understanding that even if I have a discussion with you in the White House, nothing can be signed off unless the member states are also on board. I mean, you can have that individual meeting, but we should set out our stall. Mr. Trump, President Trump, thank you for this and thank you for the interest. But we can't sign this off because we have pooled our resources within the continental economic framework as a whole. And that's what Africa needs to do. The moment we do that, and inshallah we will, that's when you can see our true strength becoming to manifest. Can you imagine whether we can call the mayor or a governor of some province in China? China is a continent. I don't believe the president of Ghana or Nigeria or South Africa can call a province to come to Ghana. It will never happen. So we need to create that structure whereby if you want to speak to me, there's a body to which I belong where these economic things are done. Similarly, again, it's about making sure that we develop these resources. We have so much money in Africa, it's mind-boggling. We have a huge amount of money, wealth. How can we do that? Why are we looking always for investors to come and provide that aluminium refinery and provide that steel refinery from our iron ore, or that gold refinery? I mean, we have them in Ghana here, thankfully, across the continent, but we don't have it in the depth that we need to sustain it. Why are we not enriching uranium here? I know that we have what do you call it? Is it International Atomic Energy Agency? Yes. And we're joined to Pendelaba Treaty in 1972 or something, in terms of the proliferation of nuclear material. But I'm just saying that we should be able to enrich uranium, because one of the countries that President Trump has invited rich in uranium. Likewise, phosphates for Senegal. You know, again, it's America recognizing that China has a monopoly on the supply chain of rare earth minerals. It wants to, again, it's looking to the future, which is well and good. I do not in any way, shape or form begrudge America for thinking America first.
Oh, absolutely.
It's about Africa thinking Africa first. And we need to develop these processes. And the money is there, Harriet.
The money is there.
We have it.
All right.
We can process our own uranium, okay, and all the other minerals to the final product end. So we're not constantly shipping out bauxite, but we're rather shipping out
raw
processed
materials,
aluminium products.
and all of
That's
that.
what we need to do.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, this is where time will permit us to actually finish our discussions for today. Thank you so much for your time. Ruben Addo, news editor from the newsrooms of Pan-African Television, and of course producer, Diplomatic Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time always. And also Ibrahim Ajay, thank you so much for joining us, a political analyst, and he's a regular. We are happy to have him on the show every now and then. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for making time to join us for today's show. And thank you also for joining us. But before I leave, let's take a look at EU in the spotlight. EU in the spotlight. Brussels hosted the Gavi High level pledging summit co-hosted by the European Union and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The summit focused on securing funding for Gavi, the vaccine alliance, to support its 2026 to 2030 strategy. World leaders pledged over 7.7 billion euros towards the 10.2 billion euros target for Gavi's next strategic period. The summit also saw the unlocking of 3.8 billion in complementary financing from developing finance institutions and 170.6 million euros in cost savings from vaccine manufacturers. President Mahama was at the event.
We all understand what's at stake. Not just scientists and health experts, all of us. We've seen how quickly the world can change. And if there's one thing we learned in the recent years, is that what happens in one part of the world can affect every one of us. Diseases don't stop at borders, and neither can our response. Last March, the European Parliament had the privilege to host Crystal Birungi, an entomologist from Uganda. It was truly eye-opening for me and all the audience. She explained how over the last decades, Gavi has vaccinated over 1 billion children, and the Global Fund has saved over 65 million lives by reducing the death rate due to AIDS, TB, and malaria by 63%. The job, she said, is not yet done. And without further investment in global health, we stand to lose all the gains made. So these investments have a multiplier effect that goes beyond health. They build economies, they change lives, create markets and a global workforce for the future. It's health and prosperity as two sides of the same coin. Today is a call for action, a call for leadership, a call that the European Parliament heard and acts on. This summit could not have come at a more important moment. Health organizations, foundations and governments everywhere are being asked to do more with less. Needs are increasing, but resources are not. And now is the time to step up. Build peace, prosperity and stability.
Across the world, many children are growing up to become responsible citizens of their communities because their lives were saved by Gavi's immunization. In Ghana, we're proud to be partners with Gavi, and I'm proud to say that in partnership with Gavi, Ghana has achieved 97% immunization coverage. But it means that another 3% is missing. And we're working hard to find those 65,000 children who are in remote areas that are difficult to reach. And I know that working with Gavi, we will be able to find those children and also give them the life-saving vaccines. Ghana is a lower middle income country, and so our partnership with Gavi is one of co-finance. And I'm proud to say that over the recent years, we spent almost $67 million on vaccines in partnership with Gavi. So on behalf of the children, I want to say thank you to Gavi. We are hoping that we'll fast-track our weaning of Gavi by 2030. We're supposed to go off Gavi funding by 2030. And it's my expectation that we'll work hard to be like Indonesia and in future become a donor country to Gavi.
Thank you so much for being our guest on today's show. We appreciate your time as always. My name is Harriet Nartey, and I look forward to hosting you same time next week. Enjoy the rest of our programs.